KRD Country TV.
Hi folks, well today we're on location at Loxley in central west New South Wales. Loxley's a small locality between Lithgow and Bathurst, and it's on a really scenic stretch of the main Western Railway line. I used to come out here a lot back in the 80s and the 90s. Haven't been out here so much in recent years, but it's always fun to get back here. It's a terrific area. Love filming out here, love photography out here. Always have. Only thing missing is is the trains. There's not that many trains out here. Although interestingly today, 2022, you can actually see more trains in daylight hours than has been the case for a number of years. Certainly back in the 80s and the 90s, you were struggling to see too many trains in daylight apart from the Central West XBT, which is what we're waiting for today, and maybe one or two others. But these days, you can see quite a few. Sunday, in fact, I saw 9 trains during daylight hours, which is pretty good. Anyway, we're out here and I'm going to talk a little bit about the equipment I've got on site because we're filming on location at Loxley. I'm making a film of passenger trains and freight trains running through this part of the Central West. So let's take a look at what we've got here. So we'll start with the camera, which is probably the most important part, and excuse the crunching underfoot, there's lots of dead twigs and leaves here. So I use 3 different kinds of camera, but today we're using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Now it's not exactly a pocket camera, you can't put it in your pocket unless you've got a huge pocket, but it's the follow-on model from the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera, which literally did fit in your pocket if you didn't have too big a lens on it. And that's a camera that I also use. I still have an original Blackmagic camera and I still use that one. But today we're using the 4K, and sitting on it is a Sirui lens. It's one of the anamorphic lenses that they've produced. I've got 3 of them, the 24, the 50 and the 75. There's also a 35mm version, which I didn't get, and basically because I thought, 24 to 50 to 75, that's probably enough. Ironically, today I could have actually used the 35mm, but anyway, that's where we are. The 4K camera comes with a micro 4/3 mount, so these lenses are micro 4/3 mounts, and they're a low-cost anamorphic lens. I'm not going to explain what anamorphic means. Simple terms is it creates the cinemascope effect, so the stretched widescreen look, but you can look it up and read all about it. There's plenty of information on the web about it, and there are plenty of YouTube videos about how to use an anamorphic lens. But I really like it for rail photography because trains by their nature are long and thin, and that sort of suits the anamorphic format, so I use it quite a bit. This is a really good lens. In fact, I think they're pretty good lenses. So I use those 3, mostly the 24, because I find that's often the most suitable for where I am, but today I've got the 50 on for this location. On the front of it, I've got a Tilter mini matte box, and I've got a Nissi neutral density filter on that. Now, I've also got some audio rigged up here. So we've got this Rode microphone here, which is plugged into the camera itself. Now, we all know that camera audio isn't great, but the preamps in the Blackmagic 4K actually aren't too bad, and with a decent microphone you can actually get some decent sound. I don't always use this audio, but it's always there as a scratch track or the backing track, if you like, so I know where we're up to. And that's important because I also record separately to another audio recorder, and the one I'm using at the moment is the Zoom F6. Now this is a pretty good recorder, and I really like using this recorder. It's got 6 channels. I've never actually used 6 channels, but today I'm using 2, and I'm using a Rode NT4 microphone. The Rode NT4 microphone's a pretty good mic. It's got the XY pattern, 2 microphones on the top. I've got them covered, of course, with a dead cat. Also my NTG2 here, it's also got a dead cat or a dead kitten wind muff on it. Rail photography is outdoor photography almost exclusively, and you're dealing with the elements, and the biggest element you're dealing with is the wind. So you cannot afford to film without some kind of wind protection. And the Rode wind protectors are actually pretty good on their own microphones, I've found. Sometimes a little bit of fiddling's required with some of the frequencies in post-production, but generally speaking, these microphones and these wind muffs will do the job. Now the Zoom F6, just back to that for a moment, the Zoom F6 records in 6 channels. I only really use 2 at a time, and the Rode NT4 microphone comes with its own cable that splits into a left and right input, so we get the stereo effect with that. The beauty of the Zoom F6 is that it can record in what's effectively an audio raw mode. It records in 32-bit float. Now, I'm not going to explain that here. Once again, you can go and look that up or watch some YouTube videos about 32-bit float, but it effectively means you don't need to get too worried about the levels of your input, and you can fix problems if they occur in post-production. Now, trains can be noisy, and train whistles can be especially noisy, especially steam train whistles, and sometimes the engine noise or the whistle noise will actually be too high for your normal recording, but the 32-bit float recording saves that. You can scale it down a bit and get some usable audio when otherwise you might not. So that's a great sort of feature. One other thing I should point out is the clapperboard. I'm old school. I use a clapperboard, and that's to synchronise the audio going into the camera and the audio going into the separate recorder. Don't really need to use a clapperboard anymore. You can sync up your audio in some software with an analysis of the waveform that the audio generates. But the clapperboard does give you a definite point at which you can synchronise in case all else fails, and occasionally it does. And it's sort of an old school thing which I really enjoy doing. And the numbers on there decode for me. So 11 is November, 8 is the date of today, which is the 8th of November, and 1 is the sequence that we're recording today. Now, this actually is matched up to what is being recorded in the Zoom F6, so it does actually make a bit of sense. Might seem a bit odd now, but it does actually make sense. It just means that I know which bit of audio goes with which bit of film. You've got to have a system if you're just new to all this stuff and you're recording audio separately, and I would encourage you to do so because you do get better quality audio with a dedicated audio recorder. You've got to have a system to keep on top of what you're recording and how you're doing it. We're using a Manfrotto tripod today, and this has got a fluid head, of course, which you need for video. I wouldn't say this is the best tripod I've ever had. I've got a better tripod, I think, that I use with the smaller Blackmagic camera, but this one does the job. It holds the weight of what's sitting on it. I haven't weighed it, so don't ask me how much that is. But it certainly works okay for what it is. We've got a battery to power the camera. I've got a Light Pro V-mount battery. It's mounted on a tilter rig for the battery mount. I've also got another tilter rig on the side here, and I use a Sony NPF battery, and that powers the monitor on the top. And the monitor is a Blackmagic Video Assist. It's one of the early model Video Assist monitors, and I've got that mounted in a small rig cage. You can see small rig on the sun hood on the top. That's just to give some better protection. And I find the monitor better than the camera monitor, although this one's not so bad, and it does come with a sun hood, so it shields the light when you need to. But I find the Blackmagic monitor, or in fact any kind of monitor, is a real help, especially when you're filming outdoors. The rods I use are, these ones are titanium. I don't know whether that's a bit of overkill, but maybe it was, but they certainly hold everything. I used to use a mat box mounted on the rods, but that was a bit too big and clumsy, I found. So now I just use the one that attaches to the lens itself. It's smaller, it's lighter, it's more easily managed, and I find that good enough. On the top here too, we've got the Samsung SSD. So as a default, I record into the SSD. The beauty of that, of course, is that you can unplug it from here and plug it straight into your computer when you get back home and copy or actually even use this as your disk for processing your film. It's actually a great way, I think, to record. People do report problems with them staying plugged in, and I found that a bit myself sometimes. You've got to keep an eye on it. But if you're careful with your cables and you don't bump things, I've found it a pretty good way to record. This is a tilter cage on the camera, by the way, and that's specifically a Blackmagic 4K cage that Tilter makes. And I find the cage is really good too, because it not only protects your camera, it makes it easy to carry it around. The handle on the top there is removable, so you can take that off if you need to. And I do take it off to pack it, but otherwise it's a great way to actually carry the camera around and everything stays connected. So we've got a bit of gear out here. Sometimes people see me in the wild and they comment on the gear, but it's all there for a purpose and it's all there for a reason. And when you're a filmmaker, you've got to have the gear. It's not a competition to see who's got the best gear, but you do need a few things. This is the view that the camera's looking at Loxley. So we're looking down towards this beautiful, well-known curve. It's a bit of a hack spot, as we say in rail photography. The trees down there on the right-hand side of the track, as you're looking towards them, they are in front of just where the station used to be. There used to be a station in Loxley and a signal box down there. And from memory, the signal box closed in 1988. The station was demolished after that. There's no trace of it there now. Still a couple of crossovers down there, or a crossover plus a siding. Don't know that they get much use. And what used to be controlled from the signal box was replaced by some automatic signals. You can't see either of them in this view, but there's one behind me. And that was the end of Loxley as a manned station. It's like many of these places, it survived probably much longer than it should have, and people expected it to, but survive it did. It was always a great place to call in to when you were travelling through the country and say hello to the signalman, find out what trains were running. Often not very many. I think sometimes the signalman appreciated having a chat to someone, broke up their day a bit. Otherwise, it was a pretty lonely life for some of these guys, and not many trains, not much to do, but they were here pretty much 24/7 during the week, not so much on weekends, the Sunday shifts. I think they used to run with one shift on Sundays, and that was built around the XPT timetable, and anything else that was running had to fit around the XPT. It wasn't that hard to do. So we're sitting out here in the countryside. It's a beautiful area. Love being out here. And as I said, we're waiting for the XPT. And when the XPT comes through, we'll be fully attending to our camera here, making sure we get it right. Let's sit back and wait, see what happens.
KRD Country TV.